In May 1863, the American Civil War was at a turning point. In the tangled forests of Virginia, a young Union soldier named Rice C. Bull would face one of the war's most brutal battles and survive to tell the tale. Rice C. Bull was 21 years old when he left his family farm in Greenwich, New York, to join the Union Army. He enlisted in the 123rd New York Infantry in 1862. His memoir, Soldiering, offers a rare unfiltered view of the war from the perspective of an ordinary soldier. I was not a hero. I was a soldier, and I did what I had to do. By spring 1863, the Union had suffered a string of defeats. General Joseph Hooker, newly appointed commander of the Army of the Potomac, launched a bold campaign to outflank Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army near Chancellorsville, Virginia. With over 130,000 men, Hooker had nearly twice Lee's numbers. But Lee, ever audacious, split his forces, sending Stonewall Jackson on a flanking march that would become one of the most daring maneuvers in military history. On May 3rd, Bull's regiment was positioned near the front. The morning was eerily peaceful. Never was there more a beautiful sunrise. It seemed to me like a sacrilege that such a sacred day should be used by men to kill and maim each other. Lee launched a ferocious assault on the Union center. Bull's regiment, the 123rd New York, was caught in the chaos. The attack began as it always did, with their yell, a shrill, long, continued, high-pitched yell that finally was drowned by the roar of musketry. Bull was shot twice, once in the face, once in the hip. Unable to move, he lay among the dead and dying. The Union line collapsed. The wounded were left behind. The first bullet entered my right cheek. The second punctured my left hip and ripped out through my back. That night a thunderstorm rolled in. Rain poured over the wounded. Bull lay in the mud, helpless. Most of them were quiet, saying little. All were weak and helpless from loss of blood. I can yet see those wounded men, half covered with the yellow mud and water. Jarring blasts of thunder commingled with the cries of the wounded Union prisoners during an unrelenting midnight storm. As the temperature fell, a bitter north wind swept across the field. I feared that everyone would perish that night. Next to me lay a suffering comrade, his chest heaving from a wound to the lungs. His breathing labored as he mumbled a prayer for death. One man stayed behind. John Larman, a musician. Though not a medic, he tended to the wounded. John Larman did his best to keep the men comfortable, scrounged food, spread blankets, and washed caked blood away. After a night of agony in the rain-soaked battlefield, Rice Bull and the other wounded Union soldiers were finally gathered by Confederate troops. They were moved to a makeshift hospital on a cleared elevation called Fairview, just a few hundred yards from the Chancellorsville crossroads. There, Bull would spend several days as a prisoner of war, wounded, weak, and surrounded by the suffering. Mud and filth, with nothing between them and the ground but their soaked woolen blankets. The Confederates had their hands full with their own wounded. We were laid in rows, side by side, and left to wait. Some groaned, some prayed, some said nothing at all. I remember the flies. They were thick, crawling over wounds, eyes, mouths. There was no strength left to brush them away. A Confederate surgeon passed by. He looked at me, shook his head, and moved on. I knew then that I would have to survive on my own. I was given a piece of hardtack and a tin of water, but that was all. But I was alive. Chancellorsville was a Confederate victory, but at a terrible cost. Over 30,000 casualties. Stonewall Jackson, Lee's most trusted general, was mortally wounded by friendly fire. It was not glory. It was not honor. It was survival. Rice Bull recovered and returned to his regiment. He would go on to fight at Sherman's March to the Sea. but Chancellorsville haunted him. I did not forget. I could not forget. The faces of the dying stayed with me. 50 years later, I could not erase the horrible memory of that night. Unlike many Civil War memoirs, soldiering is understated. Bull doesn't exaggerate. He doesn't seek praise. He simply tells what happens. I did not write to glorify war. I wrote to remember, to honor those men who didn't come home. I didn't invent a heroic narrative of war filled with gallant men who were always selfless, always dutiful, and never affected by human slaughter. My combat descriptions are clean, precise accounts, usually devoid of emotion, as if I were writing an official report to a superior. Rice C. Bull, farmer, soldier, survivor, reminds us that history lives in the memories of those who endured it. His voice, quiet but clear, still speaks.